We talk about self-discipline like it's a burden, like it's this thing we have to suffer through to get what we want. But what if I told you that self-discipline isn't about restriction? What if the whole point isn't to make your life smaller, but to make it bigger? Because real discipline, true discipline, isn't about saying no to the things you want. It's about saying yes to the things that actually matter. It's about freedom. Now, I know that sounds contradictory. How can discipline be about freedom? Isn't it the opposite? Isn't freedom about doing whatever you want whenever you want? That's the surface level version of freedom. And let's be honest, it's an illusion. Doing whatever you want whenever you want feels good for a moment, but what it leads to is chaos. You feel good at night scrolling endlessly, avoiding responsibilities. You feel good skipping the workout or delaying the project. But then time passes, and instead of feeling free, you feel stuck, you feel behind, you feel frustrated. You start living in reaction instead of intention. And that's not freedom. That's a cage. True freedom doesn't come from indulging your impulses. It comes from aligning your actions with your values. It comes from becoming the kind of person who keeps promises to themselves. That's where discipline lives, not in punishment, but in purpose. Think about any person you admire, not for their popularity or their wealth, but for who they are. Maybe it's a parent, a teacher, a leader, an artist. Whoever they are, I guarantee you one thing. They made choices that weren't always easy. They got up when it was hard. They stayed when it was tempting to leave. They did the work when no one was watching. And the reason they did it wasn't because they're superhuman. It wasn't because they like pain or struggle. It's because they were anchored in something deeper. They had a reason, a why, that pulled them forward. And when your why is strong, discipline stops being a chore and starts becoming a way of life. Here's the truth. Every time we choose discipline, we're voting for the future we believe in. Every small act of self-control is a declaration of who we want to become. It's not about the action in the moment, it's about the identity we're building. You're not just waking up early, you're becoming someone who values time. You're not just skipping dessert, you're becoming someone who values health. You're not just saying no to distractions, you're saying yes to your calling. And this is where most people get it wrong. They try to force discipline by using guilt, shame, or pressure. They try to motivate themselves through fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of falling behind. And maybe that works for a while, but fear is a terrible fuel source. It burns fast and leaves nothing behind. What you need isn't pressure. What you need is a reason that's so rooted in your core that quitting isn't even an option. A reason that makes showing up not just a task, but a commitment. I once met a young man who had struggled for years with focus and consistency. He bounced between goals, started things, rarely finished. He told me he wanted discipline, but couldn't seem to find it. So I asked him, why does any of this matter to you? And for a moment, he looked confused. He said, because I want to be successful. I asked again, why? He paused. Because I want to make my family proud. Why? His eyes started to shift. Because they gave up so much for me. I don't want it to be wasted. And then it clicked. His discipline was never going to come from a to-do list. It was going to come from honoring that sacrifice. That was his why. That was his fire. And once he connected to it, he didn't need someone to remind him to work. He was ready to go. You see, the most powerful discipline doesn't come from external rules. It comes from internal alignment. When you know what you stand for, you don't have to force motivation. It finds you. But here's the thing. Your why has to be bigger than your excuses. There will always be reasons to quit, reasons to delay, reasons to settle. But if your vision is clear, if your why is strong enough, it'll drown out every one of those voices. You don't need to become someone else to master self-discipline. You don't need to adopt some ultra-rigid system or wait for some perfect moment. You just need to look inward and ask yourself, what am I really doing this for? Not the surface reason, the real one, the reason that moves your soul. Because once you have that, the path forward isn't easy, but it is simple. Discipline isn't about saying no for the sake of it. It's about saying yes to something greater. Every decision you make, every time you choose to do the harder thing, the right thing, you're reinforcing that belief, that commitment, that identity. You're not a robot. You're not perfect. And you don't need to be. But what you do need is to be honest. You need to be clear. And you need to care enough to keep going when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or even unclear. Because that's where freedom lives. Not in the absence of rules, but in the presence of meaning. Not in giving in to every urge, but in standing firm in your values. So the next time you think about self-discipline, don't think about restriction. Think about freedom. Think about becoming the kind of person who chooses their future on purpose. Think about the life you could build, not just one day, but every single day with every single choice. That's not just discipline. That's leadership. And it starts with why. We don't struggle with discipline because we're lazy. We struggle because we're disconnected. We forget why we started. We forget what we're aiming for. And when that happens, even the most motivated person will begin to drift. They'll stop showing up. They'll stop caring. It's not because they lack willpower. It's because they lack direction. We need something to move toward. We need a vision that compels us. Not a goal that sits on a piece of paper, but something that lives in us. Something we believe in deeply. Because the truth is, we don't wake up early, sacrifice comfort, and stay the course simply because we enjoy it. We do it because we're going somewhere that matters. And when that vision is clear, discipline becomes the vehicle, not the obstacle. I've met so many people who say they want more discipline in their lives. They want to be healthier, more productive, more focused. But when I ask why now, why this goal, what does success actually look like for you? Most of them don't have an answer. Or the answer is vague. I want to be better, they say. Better than what? For whom? To what end? Without a vision, discipline becomes a burden, a checklist, a series of tasks that feel like punishment. But when you know what you're working toward, when you can see it, feel it, almost touch it, discipline becomes an act of alignment. It becomes an expression of belief. Discipline is hard when it's detached. But when it's tied to something meaningful, it transforms. You're not just saving money, you're building security for your family. You're not just studying late, you're preparing yourself to serve, to contribute, to lead. You're not just saying no to distractions, you're saying yes to becoming the person you know you're meant to be. And that's the shift. The people who master discipline aren't just better at forcing themselves to do things. They've learned how to connect the dots between effort and outcome. They've built a vision of the life they want, and they've learned to love the process, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. One of the most dangerous places we can be is in a cycle of performance without purpose, working hard without knowing why, waking up, grinding, doing all the right things, but never stopping to ask if those things are even leading us where we want to go. That's not discipline, that's burnout. A clear vision changes everything. It simplifies decision-making. When you know what you want, distractions become obvious. When you know where you're going, your yeses and your nos carry weight. You stop chasing everything that glitters, and you start chasing what matters. But here's the thing. Your vision doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to be yours, something honest, something that resonates. It can be loud or quiet, grand or humble. It can change over time. But you need it because if you don't define your direction, the world will define it for you. We live in a world that constantly tells us what to want. More money, more likes, more recognition. But most of the time, those are someone else's values. And when you live by someone else's vision, you will always feel like you're falling short. You'll work harder and harder, but feel emptier and emptier. That's not discipline. That's disconnection. Clarity is a form of power. When you know what you stand for, you don't get knocked over by every passing trend or distraction. You have an internal compass. And when life gets noisy, and it will, you have something quiet and steady to return to. That's what vision does. It anchors you. It gives context to the sacrifice. It turns the mundane into the meaningful. Think about it like this. Imagine two people digging ditches in the same field. One is just digging, the other is building the foundation of a cathedral. Same action, same weather, same sweat, but completely different experiences. Because one has vision and the other doesn't. You can't sustain self-discipline without a cathedral. You can't keep showing up just for the sake of showing up. Eventually, the effort will outweigh the reward unless the reward is bigger than the effort. And you don't find that kind of reward in outcomes alone, not in the six-pack or the promotion or the applause. You find it in purpose, in the feeling that your daily actions are part of something that matters. So here's the invitation. Get clear, get honest, ask yourself, what kind of life do I want to live? What kind of impact do I want to make? Who do I want to be when no one is watching? What do I want to give my energy to? Not because I have to, but because I want to. When you answer those questions, you'll start to feel something shift. You'll feel more grounded, more intentional. You'll stop chasing every shortcut and start building real habits. You'll stop waiting to be motivated and start moving because you're called. That's what vision does. It pulls you forward. It reminds you who you are when you forget. It helps you see the cost of inaction, not just the cost of effort. It helps you say no without regret and yes without hesitation. So if you're struggling with self-discipline, start there. Don't reach for another productivity hack or time management tool. Sit with the bigger question. What do you care about enough to suffer for? What do you love enough to sacrifice for? What are you willing to be misunderstood for, criticized for, laughed at for, because you believe in it that much? When you answer that, you'll realize something powerful. Discipline isn't just about what you do, it's about who you are becoming. And that version of you, the one who lives on purpose, who leads from within, who chooses meaning over comfort, is worth the work. Because when your vision is clear, the path might still be hard, but it will never feel pointless. And that's where real discipline begins. Not in force, but in focus. Not in willpower, but in belief. Not in pressure, but in purpose. We often think big change requires big moves, that we have to flip a switch, become someone new overnight, reinvent everything to finally get our life on track. But that's a myth. Real change, lasting change, doesn't happen in explosions. It happens in whispers. It happens in the tiny, almost invisible choices we make every day. The ones nobody sees, the ones that don't seem to matter in the moment, but they do. Discipline isn't a single act. It's a habit of small, quiet victories. It's built one choice at a time. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And every time you do, you build something. You build strength. You build momentum. You build belief. We underestimate the power of small wins because we're addicted to the dramatic. We want the transformation montage. We want the before and after photo. We want the story with the big climax. But the truth is, transformation doesn't feel like transformation when you're in it. It feels like repetition. It feels like doing the right thing again and again without applause, without recognition, without proof that it's working, until one day it does. There's a moment no one talks about on the journey to mastering self-discipline. It's not the beginning when you're full of energy and motivation, and it's not the end when you've achieved your goal. It's the middle. The boring, quiet, invisible middle. The part where nothing seems to be happening, where the results haven't shown up yet, where you question if any of it matters. That's where people quit, not because they're weak, but because they think they're alone. But the truth is, that middle is where all the magic is. That's where the muscle is built. That's where the character is formed. That's where you decide, not once, but again and again, that you are the kind of person who keeps going. There was a study done years ago that tracked the habits of people who made big lifestyle changes and stuck with them for the long haul. You know what they found? The people who succeeded weren't the ones who had the most knowledge, the best plans, or even the most motivation. They were the ones who mastered one skill, starting again. When they messed up, they didn't spiral, they didn't start over, they just picked up where they left off. They made the next right choice. And that over time made all the difference. Small wins do something incredible to the human spirit. They create evidence. They prove to your brain that change is possible, that you're capable, that you're becoming someone new, one brick at a time. And the more of these moments you collect, the stronger your foundation becomes. It could be something as simple as waking up 5 minutes earlier, drinking water before coffee, writing one paragraph instead of waiting to write the whole chapter. Small, almost unnoticeable. But these aren't just tasks, they're signals. Signals that say, I'm someone who shows up, I'm someone who follows through, I'm someone who does what they said they would do. That's identity work. And that's where self-discipline becomes sustainable. Not when you force yourself to change, but when you start seeing yourself as the kind of person who does. And you don't need perfection to build that identity. You just need integrity. You just need to keep showing up for yourself in small, honest ways. It's better to walk a mile a day for a year than to sprint for a week and collapse. Because the person who walks the mile doesn't just build endurance, they build identity. They prove to themselves over and over that they can be trusted. And that trust, that's where confidence comes from. Not from loud declarations or high-stakes pressure, but from quiet evidence that you do what you say you'll do. Self-discipline isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with instant gratification. That's why it's rare, because most people are chasing a feeling, but people who master discipline, they're chasing growth. They understand that the goal isn't to feel good all the time, it's to become good at doing the right thing, even when you don't feel like it. And the irony is, the more you do that, the more you begin to feel good, not in a shallow, fleeting way, but in a deep, grounded way. Because there's nothing more energizing than progress. There's nothing more empowering than momentum. And momentum is always built the same way, one small win at a time. It's easy to overlook the power of small wins because they don't look like much in the beginning, but stack them day after day, choice after choice, and suddenly you've created something unshakable. You've built resilience, you've built belief, you've built a life. So if you're in a season where the goal feels far away, if the mountain feels too big, zoom in. Ask yourself, what's the next right move? Not the perfect move, not the dramatic one, just the next right one, and then do it. And then do it again tomorrow, and again the next day. And when you slip, and you will, don't start over, start again. There's a difference. Starting over comes from shame. Starting again comes from belief. You don't need a complete overhaul. You don't need to wait for the new year or the perfect plan or the right mood. You need to pick one small thing and begin. That's how discipline starts. That's how it grows. And that's how it sticks. Because the truth is, the person who shows up consistently, imperfectly, and quietly over time will always outperform the person who shows up perfectly once in a while. Discipline isn't built in intensity, it's built in repetition, in small wins. And every time you choose one, you're not just making progress, you're becoming someone new. Not overnight, but inevitably. Let me know when you're ready for the fourth keynote. I'm excited to keep building this with you. We like to believe that self-discipline is all about willpower, that the key to consistency is just trying harder, that we can push through anything if we just dig deep enough. But that's only part of the truth. And sometimes it's the part that sets us up to fail. Because willpower, as strong as it can be, is limited. It fades, it gets tired. And if all you have to rely on is willpower, then every day becomes a battle. Every task becomes a test of mental strength. And eventually, you lose not because you're weak, but because the system is broken. The most disciplined people aren't the strongest. They're the smartest. They don't leave their success up to chance. They design for it. They don't hope to stay consistent. They make it easy to stay consistent. And one of the biggest ways they do that is by shaping their environment. Because environment, more than motivation, shapes behavior. We are creatures of context. We respond to what's around us, whether we realize it or not. You don't eat the cookie because you craved it. You eat it because it was sitting on the counter. You don't waste time because you planned to. You waste it because your phone buzzed and you never turned it over. These aren't failures of character. They're simply the result of poor design. When we think of self-discipline, we often imagine grit, self-control, mental toughness. And yes, those things matter. But the foundation is often much more practical. It's about reducing friction. It's about making the right thing easier and the wrong thing harder. It's about creating a world around you that nudges you in the direction of your best self. That's what the most successful people do. They don't wait to feel inspired. They set up systems that guide their behavior even when they're tired, distracted, or unmotivated. They remove the temptations before they become a problem. They make the good habits so easy to start it would feel silly not to. It's not about willpower. It's about structure. I once met a writer who'd published several bestsellers. He was known for being incredibly consistent, writing every single day without fail. So I asked him how he stayed so disciplined. He smiled and said, "I don't. I just make it really hard not to write." His writing space was always set up same time, same chair, same playlist. His internet cut off at a certain hour. His friends knew not to call in the morning. He didn't wake up and ask himself if he felt like writing. He just stepped into the rhythm he had already created. That's not laziness, that's wisdom. Environment matters because it does one crucial thing. It reduces decision fatigue. Every day we make hundreds of small decisions. What to eat, when to work out, whether to check our phone, when to start, when to stop, and every one of those decisions drains us. But when your environment is thoughtfully designed, you remove the need to make so many of those choices. You free up mental space. You preserve energy for the things that actually require it. That's how discipline becomes sustainable. Think about it like this. If your gym clothes are folded by your bed, if your alarm is across the room, if your fridge is full of healthy food, if your phone is charging in another room, how much easier does it become to follow through? Now imagine the opposite. If your phone is the first thing you see, if your workspace is cluttered, if your notifications are constantly pulling you in every direction, if your evenings are unstructured and your mornings are rushed, how likely are you to stay on track? We often blame ourselves when we fall off, but most of the time, it's not a motivation issue, it's an environment issue. We didn't plan to fail. We just failed to plan for how humans actually behave. So the goal isn't to become a superhuman who resists every urge. It's to become a wise human who rarely needs to. There's something deeply empowering about designing your environment. It's a declaration of intent. It says, I know who I want to be, and I'm going to make it easier to be that person. That one choice, a 5-minute adjustment to your space, your schedule, your routines, can change the entire trajectory of your day. And when you stack enough of those days, it changes your life. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or obsessive. It means becoming intentional. It means asking better questions. Instead of how do I force myself to be disciplined, ask, what's making this harder than it needs to be? Instead of why can't I stay consistent, ask what triggers are pulling me off course. And instead of just pushing harder, try setting yourself up better. We all design environments, we just don't always do it consciously. And the problem with unconscious design is that it often reflects the path of least resistance. The couch is more accessible than the gym. The remote is easier to reach than the book. The junk food is easier to grab than the fruit. And so the easy choice becomes the default choice, not because we're weak, but because we're human. So if we want to be disciplined, we need to flip the script. Make the good habits the path of least resistance. Make the distractions harder to reach. Remove friction where it matters. Add it where it counts. It's not cheating, it's being smart. It's setting yourself up to win over and over until success becomes automatic. That's what self-discipline really looks like. Not a constant uphill battle, but a well-designed path. A life where your environment supports your intentions, where the things you value are visible, accessible, and part of your everyday flow. And when you build that, something powerful happens. You stop relying on bursts of willpower. You stop riding the roller coaster of motivation. You start moving with quiet consistency. You start building momentum. And momentum, more than anything else, is what creates lasting change. Discipline isn't about being stronger than your environment. It's about building an environment that doesn't require you to be strong all the time. It's about making your values visible. It's about designing a world where the best version of you has the best chance to show up. Because when the environment is right, discipline feels less like a fight and more like flow. Let me know when you're ready for the 5th keynote. I'm ready to keep going whenever you are. We often believe that to be disciplined, we need to be tough on ourselves. That we need to beat ourselves up for every slip, push harder after every failure, and hold ourselves to impossibly high standards. That discipline is about being hard, strict, and unrelenting. But that belief is not only wrong, it's dangerous. Because what truly sustains discipline over time isn't punishment, it's compassion. Self-compassion. We don't talk enough about the role of self-kindness in success. We glorify hustle. We idolize those who sacrifice sleep, skip meals, and grind through exhaustion. And yet we quietly burn out. We quietly give up. We quietly fall into cycles of guilt and shame, thinking we just need to be stronger, more focused, more disciplined. But the people who truly master self-discipline aren't the ones who never mess up. They're the ones who know how to respond when they do. They've learned how to treat themselves not with cruelty, but with curiosity, not with judgment, but with understanding. They don't see failure as a flaw in character. They see it as a moment of learning. Think about it. When a friend comes to you defeated because they slipped up, what do? You don't scream at them. You don't tell them they're hopeless. You remind them of who they are. You remind them of how far they've come. You help them get back on track. But when we mess up, we often do the opposite. We shame ourselves. We say things we'd never say to anyone else. And somehow we expect that to make us better. It doesn't. Shame doesn't create change. It creates paralysis. It keeps us stuck. Because when we believe we are the failure, we stop trying. We hide, we quit. But when we can say, I failed and I'm still worthy, that's where transformation begins. Discipline is not about punishing the bad, it's about reinforcing the good. It's about building trust with ourselves over time. And trust is built the same way in every relationship, through kindness, honesty, and consistency. You don't become trustworthy by being perfect. You become trustworthy by being present, by owning your mistakes, and by showing up anyway. Self-compassion isn't soft, it's strong. It allows you to fall down and get back up, not because you have something to prove, but because you still believe in your worth. And that belief, that quiet, steady belief, is what makes discipline possible over the long haul. When we're compassionate with ourselves, we create space to course correct without collapsing. We can pause, reflect, and ask better questions. Why did I slip today? What was going on? What support did I need but didn't have? These are the questions that lead to growth, not what's wrong with me or why can't I ever get it right? Because the truth is, you're not supposed to get it right all the time. You're supposed to learn. You're supposed to evolve. Progress is messy. It's full of missteps and backtracks and pivots. But if you're measuring your discipline by perfection, you'll always feel like you're failing. That's why self-compassion is essential. It keeps the journey human. It keeps it possible. There's a misconception that being kind to yourself means lowering your standards. But that's not true. It means recognizing that your worth isn't dependent on meeting those standards. And ironically, when you believe in your own worth, regardless of performance, you're more likely to do the hard things, more likely to be consistent, because you're not afraid of failing anymore. You're not walking on emotional eggshells. You're not trying to earn your value through achievement. And that freedom, that's powerful. It gives you room to focus, to try, to risk, to grow. You're not operating from fear, you're operating from belief. And belief fuels action. Belief sustains effort. Belief builds resilience. When you're disciplined and you slip, self-compassion doesn't let you off the hook. It just changes the tone of the conversation. It says, that didn't go the way you hoped. Let's figure out why. Let's try again tomorrow. It replaces shame with strategy. And that shift makes all the difference, because what do most people do when they break a streak? They throw the whole thing away. They miss one workout and decide the whole plan's ruined. They eat one bad meal and figure, might as well eat bad all weekend. But disciplined people don't think like that. They don't let one moment define them. They zoom out. They remember the bigger picture. They say one step back doesn't erase all the steps forward. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Discipline without compassion is brittle. It snaps under pressure. It breaks when life gets chaotic. But discipline built on compassion, that's flexible. It bends, but it doesn't break. It adapts. It lasts. We often think the voice in our head needs to be a drill sergeant, that it has to yell to keep us in line. But what we really need is a coach. Someone who knows when to push and when to pause. Someone who sees our potential but also understands our limits. Someone who doesn't give up when we fall short but believes we'll find our way back. And the most important thing to realize is that you are that coach. You get to shape that voice. You get to decide if it's a critic or a guide. And the more you choose compassion, the more you'll find yourself staying in the game. Because the truth is, self-discipline is less about control and more about care. It's about caring enough to show up, caring enough to keep going, caring enough to forgive, to adjust, and to keep walking forward, especially when it's hard. So the next time you miss a step, don't ask if you're still worthy. You are. The real question is, what would someone who loves themselves do next?